All right, thank you. We are recording this meeting. I know we still have folks joining, but we're going to get started in the interest of time here. Welcome. Just again, a reminder that we are recording this meeting. So today is Friday, September 22nd, 2023. It is 2:02 p.m. And my name is Dominique Mendiola. I serve as a senior director for the Colorado Department of Revenue's Natural Medicine Division. Today, we are hosting our third listening session for the implementation of Senate Bill 23-290. And this directs our stand-up of a regulatory framework for natural medicine operations here in Colorado. Your participation in these sessions will help inform our development of resources and the regulatory framework for natural medicine operations. We are going to begin our formal rulemaking in 2024, and we will begin accepting applications for licenses related to this program by December 31st of 2024. I am joined by my co-chair, Allison Robinette, who is the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the division, and also joined by our colleagues at the Department of Public Health and Environment, as well as the Governor's Office. We are also joined by our colleague with the Department of Regulatory Agencies, Sam Barami. Sam is the Senior Advisor on Natural Medicine Services for DORA and has been working really closely with the Natural Medicine Advisory Board. We have Advisory Board member Ricardo Baca in attendance today on behalf of the board. And joining us from the Colorado Department of Law, we have Christy DeMaria and Paige Olson, who represent the Natural Medicine Division within the Department of Revenue. All right, moving on to our next slide here. Today's session is intended to start our conversation around public education campaigns that the department is required to provide. We look forward to hearing from all of you, and we'll be taking the information from this session to inform our implementation work and determine needs for additional listening sessions before we move into our formal rulemaking proceedings. That will also provide additional opportunities for stakeholder engagement and feedback. So just a few notes for our participation today. This meeting is being recorded. I know I've said that a few times, so I want to make sure everyone is clear on that. The chat has been disabled so we can focus on our conversation. That said, we have team members who will be dropping resources, information into the chat as we mention certain details. So you will have access to that. When we open up the floor for discussion, we ask that you come off mute and introduce yourself, including your name and any organization you represent. If you are joining our Zoom meeting on the phone, you can raise and lower your hand by dialing *9. You can also mute and unmute by dialing *6. We will be monitoring the queue to make sure we are reserving enough time for anyone who wants to make a comment. And while there is no limit on the number of comments you can make today, we really want to hear from all of you. We ask that you try to limit any one comment at a time to around 2 minutes, so we're providing adequate time to hear from all interested parties today. All right, I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Allison, to take us through some additional details.
Thank you, Dominique, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. So quickly, we're going to walk through some of the changes that we also gave an overview of at our last meeting last week, which is under Prop 122 and now Senate Bill 290, and what Senate Bill 290 changed about the proposition. And there are really three aspects to that. So first, the movement authorizes the personal use of natural medicines, including allowances for personal cultivation, possession, and use. For personal cultivation, individuals are restricted to cultivating natural medicine and not more than 12 feet by 12 feet on private property, which is defined further in statute. And that area must be both enclosed and locked. For personal possession and use, there is no possession limit built into the law, and individuals are permitted to share with another adult over the age of 21. With the permissions, there are also some restrictions on personal possession and use, including prohibiting against accepting payment for natural medicine and manufacturing with inherently dangerous substances, among other restrictions. Second, the proposition and law authorized our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agencies to license and regulate facilitators of natural medicine services. And third, the law authorized and directed the Department of Revenue through the Natural Medicine Division to license and regulate healing centers, cultivations, manufacturers, and testing facilities, and then assigned certain other duties. As we've discussed in more detail in these listening sessions, the scope of those responsibilities assigned to the Natural Medicine Division is there's a variety of powers and duties and responsibilities. And so we encourage anyone who was not able to join those previous listening sessions, predominantly the first one, to go back and watch that recording for additional background about what the DOR is tasked with in this space. So with that, Dominique, walk us through the statutory requirements.
Thank you, Allison. So today's focus is on public education campaigns and materials. So we want to flag the relevant statutory language that informed our basis for this meeting today. So as you can see on the screen here, section, and this is reflected in section 44-50-202 of the new Colorado Natural Medicine Code, which requires within subsection H that the state licensing authority develop and promote accurate public education campaigns related to the use of natural medicine or natural medicine product, including public service announcements and educational materials. Let's also just briefly touch on the resources that we provided ahead of this meeting to inform today's discussion. We did send out an agenda with some materials ahead of time, and that includes links to a few education initiative resources from the state as well as some other sources. This includes, for example, information from the Colorado Department of Education, specifically their marijuana education initiative. We recognize there are distinctions between the state's cannabis and natural medicine program that we need to keep in mind here. However, this initiative is about offering resources for parents and educators and curriculum available for elementary, middle, and high schools. So this could generally inform our identification and prioritization of target audiences and how we approach the development of resources. We also included information from Drug Science, which is based in the UK, and that involves resources that they offer, which include medical, psilocybin, educational resources. And finally, we included an example educational resource from the Colorado Department of Transportation, specifically related to microdosing and driving. So again, it's cannabis related, but could generally inform how we adapt resources that are specific to natural medicine and where we expect to hear concerns around similar issues or risks like impaired driving. So the resources we shared were compiled from our initial research and outreach efforts and are intended to inform our conversation today. And to be clear, the information we identified and shared does not amount to an endorsement of any private organization. Finally, we recognize that this does not encompass the world of information that's available. We continue to invite and really encourage interested parties with relevant insights, perspectives, or information to please share those additional resources with us by emailing Allison Robinette, my colleague. And so we're going to make sure that folks have access to her contact information so that you can route that information to us. We'll drop that in the chat. We noted this also in our prior listening session, but want to flag again here. In the interest of transparency about the resources we've gathered and received from stakeholders so far, what we'd like to do is provide a central place for interested parties to see what we've compiled. Our plan along these lines is to pull this information together and make it publicly available on the listening session page of our website. Again, this doesn't mean we endorse that information. It also doesn't mean that we have fully vetted and approved those resources or determined that they are in fact relevant to the subjects of our discussion. But if resources are shared with us and are represented as potentially relevant, we want to make sure that you all know that we have that information. We'll do a deeper dive into those resources as we prepare for our formal rulemaking that will begin in 2024. And once we do publish this information on our website, we welcome additional input from you all as our stakeholders about what you all see as relevant to our implementation work, as well as if you have any concerns or questions about those resources. All right, Allison, I think we're going to be teeing up some presentations here if you want to kick us off.
Yes, thanks, Dominique. So next, we are really grateful to our colleagues at the Department of Public Health and Environment who are attending today and are going to provide some insights into their experience and perspectives on creating effective public education campaigns. And so with that, I would like to welcome Sam Borden and her team at the Department of Public Health and Environment to go ahead and come off mute and introduce themselves and share any insights they would like to.
Thank you so much for having us. My name is Sam Borden. I am the Harm Reduction Grant Fund Manager at the Overdose Prevention Unit at CDPHE. I'm also joined by my colleague, Heather Link Bergman, who has been incredibly supportive in developing the public awareness campaign that I'll be talking a little bit about today. So she will have some insights to share as well. We've obviously rolled out several different public awareness campaigns in the past through CDPHE, but this one is most relevant because we are in the process of creating it. So I think that some of the lessons learned may be helpful for you all as we're going along. So this campaign was authorized in statute through Senate Bill 221326. And that may also be known to you as the Fentanyl Accountability and Prevention Act. So there were American Rescue Plan Act dollars appropriated to our program so that we could develop a campaign for the general public, informing individuals and communities about what fentanyl is, what the laws are around possession, around responding to an overdose, any sort of evidence-based practices for the general public around accessing treatment, and how to respond to an overdose as well and access naloxone. So our campaign audience is fairly broad, which brings into play many different considerations as we move forward to ensure that we're really engaging the general public and we're having representation from all corners of Colorado and different demographic identities. So we really started off this campaign by working on some subject matter expertise around the topic as we knew it. This was subject matter expertise that came from the department itself, from our partners in the community, whether that be harm reductionists, medical providers, first responders, people who use drugs, just to ensure that we were representing the best available information. It was also really important to us to have a myth-busting element to the campaign, because with fentanyl in particular, we know that there's been a lot of information circulating, as happens with a new or novel substance. And much of that information was not necessarily correct. And so we wanted to make sure that we were giving proper education around the risks and possible intervention points for harm reduction or overdose prevention. This is also meant to encourage individuals to respond to a fentanyl overdose and also provide some additional guidance to first responders, including those who may be people who use drugs. And having said that, I'm going to go ahead and pass on the mic to my colleague, and she can talk a little bit more about the more in-depth weeds we're getting into around advisory councils and really reaching out to the community to get some more information on their opinion of what this campaign should look like. Heather.
Great. Thank you, Sam. And thank you all so much for having us at this meeting. My name is Heather Link Bergman. I'm the communications manager at CDPHE that will be working specifically on our upcoming fentanyl awareness and education campaign. So just to give you all a very brief update on that, we are currently in the RFP selection process for finding a vendor for that campaign. So not many updates I can provide on that at this moment, but what I can share with you all is that for this project, we are considering a number of strategies for audience and community engagement, including but not limited to advisory groups, work groups, broader community engagement through partnerships, audience research, and then finding opportunities for our audience to meaningfully participate in the creative concepting and production of our campaign materials. Of course, we are also really excited to learn about any other successful audience and community engagement strategies from our partners, including some of you who are on this call today. And then so just to share a little bit of insight too into what exactly we are looking for and hoping for in our process and in our partnerships, specifically with our vendor who we'll work with on this campaign. We're looking for a realistic plan to authentically and compassionately include individuals with lived experience using drugs at every stage of this campaign. So we consider meaningful inclusion to go beyond ensuring that people with lived experiences are included in focus groups, We also want to make sure they're included in in-depth interviews, message testing, and creative development. And we would like to partner with these folks in order to conduct the interviews, facilitate the groups, and conduct the outreach within their own communities. We're also looking to work effectively and responsively across the many different regions in Colorado. We're hoping to go beyond developing and distributing partner toolkits and newsletters and going into communities and seeking more meaningful ways to involve them and have them feel interested in amplifying campaign messages. It's also incredibly important for us to allocate an adequate and appropriate budget to compensate community members engaged in this campaign. So this would include, but would not be limited to, compensating research participants, community consultants, creative consultants, advisory committee members, campaign outreach partners, and other people who are really important to the success of this campaign. And when I talk about compensation, this may include direct payments, but this could also be meaningful opportunities for participants' professional development, such as workshops or trainings, and other ways in which the campaign can give back to the communities that we're trying to communicate with. And then lastly, we are really interested in emphasizing creative approaches to addressing the challenge of reaching audiences who may not be easily reachable through conventional media channels. So of course, these are going to be a part of this campaign. We anticipate having broad statewide reach, so there certainly is a role for television, radio, digital advertising, et cetera, et cetera. But in addition to that, we also want to develop a media plan that meets our audiences where they are. And we are looking for vendors who are able to share creative tactics and key performance indicators that will help us evaluate the success of some more unconventional methods. So that's all I have for updates now, but please feel free to ask questions, and looking forward to be able to providing more information to this group in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sam and Heather, so much for your insights and perspectives, as well as your guidance. I think that will be really helpful to us as we navigate this discussion. We are also joined today by the Governor's Special Advisor on Cannabis and Natural Medicine, Ian Sieb, who will provide his perspective on the state of Colorado's cannabis education campaigns and how that evolved within the space. Ian, please.
Thank you, Allison. I hope everybody can hear me. Of course, there's some construction going on outside, so I hope that it's not too bad. As Allison said, my name is Ian. I'm the Governor's Special Advisor on Cannabis and Natural Plant Medicines, and have been intimately involved with the education campaigns that have taken place related, again, to cannabis here in Colorado since the inception of those campaigns, way before I started working in the governor's office. I was previously appointed by Governor Hickenlooper to be a part of the Marijuana Education Oversight Committee, which we still have today. But that was really a group that started to develop some of the educational campaigns in Colorado. So I have been working with around these educational campaigns since the beginning. And so what I wanted to point out was, as Dominique suggested earlier, the bill that was passed this past session speaks to developing and promoting accurate public education campaigns, which includes public service announcements and really informing the public. And so I wanted to just briefly touch and show some of the opportunities that we have here in Colorado. Again, as it relates to cannabis, there isn't really a good corollary. It's not like states or really anywhere have developed robust campaigns, educational campaigns, talking about psychedelics, other than nonprofit organizations who are actively engaged in the space. Some other history, just to inform you before we get going into the campaigns, is that there was, prior to Amendment 64 in Colorado, many of you know that there was a medical cannabis program in place for about 12 years prior to the vote, but beginning in 2000 is when we had medical cannabis. We began regulating it in 2010, and the adult retail sales began in 2014. So all of the campaigns that I'm speaking about came about after the onset of adult use. Obviously, there's a big difference here relating to adult use cannabis sales versus personal use, as well as facilitated use of natural plant medicines. And so I want to stress that I understand that there is a difference here regarding one, the difference between marijuana and natural plant medicines, and two, the different regimes and the different ways that we are regulating both marijuana as well as natural plant medicines in Colorado. The underlying point that I'd like to get across is that there was an opportunity to create public awareness regarding acknowledging and regarding the use of cannabis. And so with that, I'll just get into some of the things that I wanted to touch on, which is thematically, one of the things that I think that we learned in developing these campaigns is that the government kind of lost the people's trust as an authority on marijuana about 100 years ago with what we saw something known as reefer madness. And one of the things that we learned while starting to engage in these campaigns is that although scare tactics may not be effective, they're really, really popular and have been traditionally in terms of campaigns like Just Say No from the 80s, the DARE campaign coming out of the 90s. And so, and also that there was a lot of limited research when we were developing campaigns. And as we started to think about developing campaigns and showing different things to say youth, for example, those well-researched statements that came out were often seen as quote propaganda by youth in particular. And so we really tried to get away from, at least with the very first campaign that we engaged in early 2015, with all the reasons to just say no and DARE programs, as I was talking about earlier. And we wanted to really use it as, instead of telling people what you couldn't do, more of what you could. And so I'm going to ask Allison if she could. I'm going to play a 1-minute video for you here that was the first public education campaign really anywhere in the country related to Colorado. And yeah, Allison, please go ahead.
Here's a message from the state of Colorado to the state of Colorado. Now that marijuana is legal here, we've all got a few things to know. But instead of just telling you what you can't do, we're going to tell you what you can do too. Here we go. If you choose to use, don't drive high. Instead, just walk or skip or catch a ride. You can even frolic or stroll or run. Just remember, you got to be 21. That's to have and to hold and to buy and to use. And if you do, public space, federal land, and your car aren't the place. Stay at home. Keep it locked and under a lid. And most importantly, keep it out of reach of the kids. For those underage, it's just not okay. Their brains are still growing, so keep it away. And remember, whatever you get here can't leave our state. So stick around a while. You'll find this place is pretty great. Visit goodtoknowcolorado.com for more info. Because when it comes to marijuana, it's good to know.
Thanks, Allison. So, it's a little quirky, sing-songy. It was meant to draw attention. It received national accolades. It went all over the country. Other states developed similar campaigns telling people what you could do instead of what you couldn't do. And so one of the things as we get into developing these campaigns, hopefully, is to take some of the positive takeaways that we learned from that first campaign. A couple years later, we engaged in another campaign. Obviously, we're not only talking about youth when we want to be involved in running these education campaigns. This next one was geared specifically towards youth, and it was called Protect What's Next. And with Protect What's Next, the goal of that campaign was to purposely create a culture of non-use by helping young people realize that their goals and dreams as youth were easier to achieve without marijuana. It was a viral campaign, and it was done very purposely through social media with targeted ads towards youth. And it was a series of vignettes, different 30-second videos, things very simple like a 15-year-old that's passing a driver's ed test and getting their driver, or a 16-year-old getting their driver's license and suggesting that that's a better use of their time, or somebody that's working out, somebody after school working in a garage, changing some oil. One of the things that we learned about youth use, at least related to cannabis use, is that LGBTQ youth use at 3 times the rate of their straight other students. And so we had some ads that were geared specifically towards LGBTQ youth as well. And again, that was called the Protect What's Next campaign. And again, it was a viral campaign that was directed just towards youth. And then in 2018, we created there were a series of campaigns. We had starting our first campaigns were focused on youth use as well as adult use, 2 separate campaigns. We also had a campaign about trusted adults, and finally a pregnant and breastfeeding campaign. And some of those are still up. Allison, would you mind going to the page that I asked you to share with everybody? This page is still up today thank you. It's up today on CDPHE's website. Responsibility grows here. Some of you may recall a few years ago, there was a campaign for somebody, a fictional character named Meg the Bud Tender. And so again, there's 4 campaigns here. You can see them up at the top: responsible marijuana use, youth and marijuana, talking tips for adults, trusted adults, and marijuana and pregnancy. And they were very targeted ads with specific needs. And they came about as a result of us understanding, convening the Marijuana Education Oversight Committee through the Department of Public Health and Environment and the Governor's Office, bringing together a vast number of stakeholders from all over the state, including students, including people involved in the industry, teachers, mental health counselors, and really a large makeup, concerned parents, concerned citizens, to have these opportunities to engage in dialogue that would then help shape what we were trying to do with the marketing firms that ended up producing these. One of the things that I also want to add to it is that there were appropriations for this, and they came from the Marijuana Tax Cash Fund to create all of these education campaigns. Currently, Senate Bill 290 and the ballot proposal did not offer a mechanism and did not create a taxable event related to the taxing of this product. And so what I'm getting at is that there were appropriated dollars that came from taxes that were passed by the voters. And so as we develop it, as we develop an educational campaign, which is in statute, it's just going to be critical to understand that pulling dollars from a cash fund versus going to our larger pool of the state of the general fund is something that's going to need to be considered as we develop these campaigns. I think that's it. Allison, I'll turn it back to you. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be here the whole time and can address anything. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ian. So we are going to dive back into our goal of talking today about who are our key audiences, as well as our key subject areas for focus. And so, as we think about this, I did want to highlight that what input we heard from our last listening session can also inform these conversations and highlight how all of these areas are intertwined. So your input in this process is critical and beneficial. So for example, we heard last week from a veterinarian about how we collectively can be thinking about the impacts beyond those that are tied directly to personal use or participation in natural medicine services. And while that comment was raised in the context of first responder training, I think it also raises important considerations for this conversation about public education generally as well. We also want to continue emphasizing the importance of collaboration among state agencies where experts within the state can help inform our implementation work at the Department of Revenue. And so the comments about other agencies and how we can look to leverage all of our collective resources really prompt us to think more deeply about how can we best coordinate with experts across the state, and what can we coordinate with other agencies within current resources, as Ian was just suggesting, or maybe require additional resources through the legislative process. And then finally, as Dominique will be getting into with our discussion questions, where should we be focusing our initial efforts for key audiences and subject areas? And recognizing that some areas, such as education about potential risks, would require closer coordination and thoughtful review of literature and studies, expert panel considerations, and similar steps that just require a more technical and careful approach to ensure that any materials the state is publishing are accurate and supported by the data. So looking at key audiences that we have initially identified, they're listed here on this slide, so I won't walk through each of those, but really interested in hearing folks' feedback on whether we're hitting the right audiences in this initial discussion. And additionally, for focus areas for education campaigns, recognizing that personal use provisions are already effective, and so recognize that folks have questions, and this could be an area that we could really provide a lot of assistance and support to folks who are interested in the personal use provisions right now. But then even looking beyond that of what our campaigns should be focusing on, such as driving or safe storage, those aspects that are going to be most useful to the public right now. And I'll hand it over to Dominique.
Great, thank you. So we have our discussion questions up, and if folks are knowing that the hour is going by quickly here, and that also informs really needs for additional meetings on this topic specifically. But if folks are interested in jumping in as I'm introducing these questions, please start putting your hands up in Zoom so that we can make sure we're starting a queue here. So we provided these discussion questions ahead of the meeting so we can be prepared to jump right in. And if there's something not reflected here that you'd like to bring to the table, we want to hear from you on that front as well. We want to hear from you around whether we've identified all the right target audiences for purposes of public education campaigns, and which audiences should we prioritize for those campaign development and launch. For example, considering, as Allison mentioned, the personal use provisions that are currently in effect and the fact that the regulatory program won't take effect until later in time, does that inform how we prioritize our focus? As well as what types of resources are most effective in public education campaigns, and what, if any, perceived gaps exist in public education regarding natural medicines. All right, so again, please raise your hand, and we're going to make every effort to work through our queue in the order that hands go up. When you come off mute, please introduce yourself so we know your name and any organization you are representing today. All right.
We'll start with Dr. Casara Andre.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Casara Andre. I am a practicing veterinarian here in the state of Colorado. I am also a veteran. I served as a veterinarian for the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps in the early part of my career. Currently, I run several veterinary-based businesses in Colorado as well as globally. And I also serve as the director of our state's Veterinary Medical Response Corps. So I come at this from a couple of different perspectives. I want to propose 3 big groups that should be considered in some of these public education campaigns. The first one being animal owners. This is a pretty easy one to tackle. Anytime there's a warning about storage for children, keeping out of reach, this is simple. And animals also works as well. Animals are good climbers, cats can open doors, just some interesting things to think about there. I also want to mention the fact of shared experiences and the consent of an animal being present when a human is working with a psychedelic substance. Anecdotally, we have several stories about cats with prolonged anxiety after their human has experimented with psychedelics in the home, dogs with severe anxiety when they've gotten into someone's stash and were left alone, and they have new behavioral disorders that were not present ahead of time. We also want to mention, keeping in mind service animals. After a human has experienced a psychedelic substance, there is nothing to say that that service animal, a diabetic alert animal, a seizure alert animal, is still able to do their job for the human patient. We just don't have data on that, and it should be in the mind of human physicians. I will say that we have an exposure survey out now, and we're also piloting a couple of different education campaigns to see what takes hold in that area. Next category being veterinary professionals. I mentioned this on the last listening session. We are developing some harm reduction education training for clinicians working in ER clinics, urgent cares, pet poison control centers. ASPCA is the first call, so they should be well informed about psychedelic substances. Veterinary behavioral referral centers also should kind of be included in those ideas. And then lastly, I'll mention human therapists, so therapists who are serving human clients. We have quite a few anecdotal reports of human therapists encouraging intentional exposures as well as for owners to microdose their animals. And we just like to voice that that's very inappropriate, far outside the scope of practice for those therapists, as well as substances researched in humans have very different effects in animals. Dosing can be very, very different depending on the species. So a lot of potential for harm there. Last piece that I'll bring up is the ethics of using animals in psychedelic assisted therapy. So assisted trained therapy animals, those animals actually need additional training to know how to navigate some of these very volatile emotional situations. So while animal assisted therapy is a well researched, very well established field, using animal assistance in psychedelic assisted therapy is an area that we need to pay a little bit more attention to. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much for your insights, Doctor.
We'll go next to, and I apologize if I mess up your last name, Kevin Franciotti.
That was pretty close, Allison. Don't worry, telemarketers have been getting it wrong my whole life. Franciotti. I'm a licensed addiction counselor in private practice. I'm also on the support staff for Naropa University's graduate training certificate program in psychedelic assisted therapies. And I'm a representative of a recovery organization known as Psychedelics in Recovery that facilitates peer support around the use of psychedelics for integration for people that are in recovery from substance-related and behavioral addictions. So I'm coming at this, like Dr. Andre, from a couple of different points here, and I really appreciate the observation that we have the community healing in effect right now while we're generating the rulemaking process for regulated access. So I think a couple of things that are really important are highlighting the fact that some folks with addiction histories or those that are suffering from mental health conditions are seeking access to medicines through the community healing model. And we have to recognize that there may be a lack of awareness and education from the existing providers in the mental health and behavioral health space. So when these clients do have these experiences and they go back to their traditional therapist or addiction counselor or peer support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, they may experience stigma, ignorance, ostracization, and things like that. So it's one thing to kind of equip those individuals seeking healing experiences with knowledge, but also equipping the clinicians that are handling patients under their care with the open-mindedness and awareness that this is now law and that many of their patients are likely going to be seeking these experiences. One population that I did not see highlighted in obviously understanding the broad reach of some of the demographics that were highlighted, but a particularly vulnerable population of people pursuing these experiences would be veterans experiencing trauma that may be not achieving the success that they would like to see in their traditional treatment. Given the suicide rates among that population, that should likely be a heavily prioritized population. And lastly, with types of resources that are most effective, I appreciated Sam's take from the harm reduction perspective. What we see is an incredibly effective avenue for educating people is when peers educate each other. What we see with naloxone use for overdose, it's actually the individuals experiencing being unhoused and living in encampments that are reversing overdoses in each other. They're educating each other on use of sterile syringes and paraphernalia to reduce disease transmission and things like that. So really empowering individuals to educate each other has been proven to be really effective in distributing harm reduction information. So thank you for listening. I'm happy to follow up. I know I already emailed Allison and Sam some resources about the group I represent, but thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Tasia Poisat.
Thanks, Allison. Amit. My name is Tasha Poinsett. I'm the state director with the Healing Advocacy Fund here in Colorado, which is working to support the rollout of the entire regulated model. I also served on the steering committee for Proposition 122, have been working closely in this realm for the past couple of years. So really happy to be here today. And I think my first comment sort of echoes what Kevin brought up, which is that I think one big audience is folks in the mental health and healthcare realm. I think there are a lot of questions out there about how this is rolling out and interest potentially in participating, but not knowing exactly where to look for resources. And then to Kevin's point, making sure that people, even if they're not directly participating as licensed facilitators or in that capacity, have the appropriate information to answer questions from patients that are seeking out access to these therapies. So that would be one kind of important audience, I think. And then the other comment I want to make is just sort of more of a broad framework comment, which is that I think in any public education campaign around psychedelics, it's really important to recognize and reflect what we do know about the safety profile of these different medicines. So they each do have different safety profiles, and particularly in the case of psilocybin mushrooms, I think it's important to recognize that the research indicates that they do have a really strong safety profile overall. There's a well-known research that was published in The Lancet about over a decade ago, comparing the harms from psilocybin mushrooms to other substances that are commonly available throughout society, such as alcohol, cannabis, the list goes on, and found psilocybin really at the low end of the list in terms of the measurable harms to self and to society. Now, that's not to say, of course, that they're risk-free, but I think that what's really important when we're thinking about how we roll this measure out responsibly as a state is recognizing that we are communicating to people that there are potential mental health benefits to accessing these medicines. So I think what is needed is to contextualize that a little bit. So acknowledge that, yes, there's a growing body of research that indicates that they can be really helpful for these mental health conditions and other challenges that people are facing. But that what we're seeing is that benefit can best be actualized within a supportive context. And so really leaning into what we do know from the research and from within our communities, working with psychedelics around set and setting and the importance of informing and educating ourselves prior to these experiences. So I think that those pieces should be at the center of any public education campaign. And then finally, I just want to say, leaning into the incredible knowledge that exists within our communities with a robust kind of set of professionals operating in this space. There's the NOAC Society that has already been doing really strong work around education for several years in Colorado. So engaging folks in those community groups to help inform the way that these campaigns are crafted. All I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasha. Next, we'll go to Andrew Monty.
Thank you so much. My name is Andrew Monty. I work for Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Safety. And so, first of all, I just want to say that this is an important initiative, and I want to say that healthcare providers actually really should be a major focus of the education campaign. The reason for that is because they will be having patients that are utilizing these substances both for medical reasons as well as exploratory and spiritual reasons. And so we just have to make sure not to mitigate that stigma and thereby also facilitate conversation with providers. So education of the medical provider community is actually really critical in order to get the facts out there around some of the safety elements that have been outlined so far, and also the potential risks. The other piece I'd like to point out is that data is critical, right? Anecdote will often drive the day when people are starting new initiatives. And so we have to continue to measure data on outcomes, and really that way anecdotes that could potentially negatively impact the program can be mitigated through realities. So we at Rocky Mountain are committed to helping and then improving the safety and demonstrating the effectiveness where that comes into play. So thanks very much for all the initiatives and the comments that have been made thus far.
Great, thank you, Dr. Monte, and everyone else who's provided perspective and feedback. And we appreciate this opportunity to look to your experience and subject matter expertise to inform our work on this front. Dr. Monte touched on how critical data is in this arena, and specifically as it, on many avenues, but as it also relates to how we are developing public education campaigns. And Allison touched on this earlier as well, is that there'll be some areas where we can likely prioritize in shorter order certain materials based on what the law provides, and making sure we're creating awareness around what is currently legal in Colorado for folks to engage in, but also thinking through, and there are obligations in this law around data collection that cover a number of areas, but where might we also really need to think about as it relates to our development of public education campaigns, other data points, that other data that we just really need to be focusing in on to make sure that we are taking those steps and working through where we need to make sure that we're identifying risks appropriately and have data to back that up. As well as any other resources that we're developing. I see some other hands up. So if Allison, you want to facilitate.
Yes, thanks, Dominique. And I did want to highlight one other piece for folks just to think about as other folks are commenting, is hearing back more about specific groups like healthcare providers that might need to be prioritized for education, thinking about ways that we can have those touch points. Is it through work groups where we're bringing everyone into a meeting together, into a room together to talk through, or is it written materials that will also help us figure out how we can prioritize where our efforts are going to make sure we're getting educational materials to these key audiences? We'll go to Kristen Spear.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dr. Kristen Spear. I'm a board certified clinical pharmacist. I sit on the board of directors on a nonprofit that I co-founded called the Psychedelic Pharmacists Association. I would be a proponent of looping in pharmacists, community pharmacists in this discussion. Pharmacists are the most accessible healthcare provider and are equipped with the knowledge and expertise with drug pharmacokinetics, mechanisms of actions, interactions with other drugs, interactions with diseases. One simple way I see that pharmacists could be involved is sparking a conversation with written materials like pamphlets and such at local community pharmacies, retail pharmacies. I also want to make a separate comment about looping in Indigenous and legacy cultures and experts in this field. I think that they hold a lot of expertise, a lot more than I think many clinicians do at this point. And so I'm a big proponent of incorporating and centering some of our Indigenous individuals into these conversations and supporting the education that we need for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spear, for providing your perspective and other suggestions on this front. I do also just want to flag, as it relates to the members of the Indigenous community, there is already, we're engaging in direct outreach on that front, but also we know our partners at the Department of Regulatory Agencies, based on the language in Senate Bill 290, that does include a dedicated work group focus that is intended to bring together specifically members of federally recognized tribes and Indigenous community members, so that we can ensure that that perspective, that critical perspective, is a part of this conversation and informing our work. And so a lot of work that we know we need to be focusing in on that front, and appreciate your raising that.
Thank you, Dr. Spear. We'll go next to Dr. Angela Beers.
Hello, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. So I'm Dr. Angela Beers. I'm a psychologist and I practice in Colorado as well as Michigan. And I previously worked at Naropa. I worked for the DOC in Michigan and a variety of other nonprofits and organizations. So some of the comments that I have are in regards to some gentle suggestions around what educational and certificate programs can identify as experts. As the last speaker had mentioned, I think it was Dr. Spears, You know, there's this question of like authority and who actually is an expert, what deems them as an expert. And it's very important in articulating that to the community, as this is something entirely new being rolled out. To mislead the public is a grave mistake. And so I think that needs to be addressed. And then the other suggestion I have is regarding educational material to reflect. And I would recommend that all material, all marketing, all education to the public needs to include the piece of that these medicines have been long practiced in a very religious and spiritual way in many cultures. And to not acknowledge that is a disservice to the public, because the public then only has half of the information and they consider it still just drugs and not actually a medicine. And one of the things that does need to be attended to in this is it's going to be tricky, and it does have to be hammered out a little bit further, is this piece around minors, this piece around people who are under the age of what SB 23290 and Prop 122 identified, because in spiritual and religious practices, there are longstanding ceremonies that do include youth. So that needs to be included in that as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. We'll go to Lauren Devine.
Thank you so much. My name is Lauren Devine. I'm a licensed attorney in Colorado and Massachusetts. I've been specializing in cannabis and branching into natural medicine here. One of the things I want to bring up for educational materials is the suggestion to engage diversity, equity, and inclusion experts to ensure that these materials are made available in a variety of formats and a variety of languages as well, so that we're making sure that these diverse communities are being reached with the appropriate format and media that's accessible to them.
Great, thank you for all the comments we received, and Lauren, appreciate that as well. That's a just great flag for us to make sure that we are on the front end of this, and as we go early into that development of materials, that we already have top of mind. How are we making sure that this information is accessible in many ways, including in different languages? That's really critical here. And also want to recognize, I know we're getting close to time here, but we do have a couple minutes to still hear from some folks. If there are some other hands that folks would like to put up and share any final comments. But while we're looking for any other hands to come up for folks to contribute, also want to share that another part of the expectations under the law as we engage in our implementation work, they're guided by some specific directives that, among others, but that I want to highlight here based on what we've heard, is that as we develop this regulatory framework, ensuring that we are looking at it through the lens of avoiding what could be seen as a commercial program, so avoiding commercialization, because that's not what this is. As we see with cannabis, is really that is a commercial program, and that is not similar to what we're implementing here. And so it's important that we're addressing that, and that that's top of mind as we develop our regulatory framework. Similarly, that we are that our framework does not lead to any or create perceptions of exploitation and specific to Indigenous communities and the historical uses of these natural medicines. And so those are areas that we need to be very respectful of and make sure that we're keeping top of mind as we engage in our work. All right, I don't see other hands up at this time. While there may be any, some that pop up as we're getting close to time, do want to mention that we, with the issues that were touched on today and the recommendations that came up, this is certainly an area we know we are going to be interested in scheduling another listening session for. And we are also going to be looking at where we can reserve additional time and offer an in-person element to that as well. So that'll be our next round of meetings that we look to announce. Erica, I see your hand up if you'd like to jump in.
Thanks so much. I just had and this doesn't actually pertain to the public. So I'm a registered nurse and I work in a rural area in southwestern Colorado. one of the issues that we have here with rural health is working with sometimes some outdated ideas on health within the local communities. So it's not exactly public education, but maybe reaching out to the Board of Commissioners, local governments, that kind of thing, in a language that they can understand, which is the law. Just providing some education to them about what this means. There's still going to be some communities that feel like they can opt out, even though that they cannot. So that's just something to consider, is reaching out to some of those local governments. Thank you, Dominique.
Thank you, Erica. That's a great point for us to be flagging as well.
Yes, Penny Riccardi. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
That's okay. Thank you, guys. Hey, I just wanted to mention, because you guys mentioned the Department of Education and their resources for drug education. Those resources are simply recommendations, not requirements. And what kids learn in school about drugs is up to the districts individually. So if there are things specific to this topic that you think are essential to be communicated to school age kids, that might be a demographic that you specifically call out, because it depends on where you go to school, what you're going to get in a classroom regarding this subject.
Great, thank you for that feedback. And we certainly do want to be thinking about where are there opportunities for us to work with partner agencies or look to see where we can otherwise offer certain resources available to schools, but also where are we looking directly to connect with different educational organizations in a way that we can bring folks to these organizations to be sharing information directly. And so we'll be that's just another area that we appreciate getting feedback on, so that we can continue to think about how we're prioritizing that and how we're looking to deliver materials and develop those materials initially. And do see a lot of really critical need to make sure that we're considering opportunities to and the value of partnering with our partner agencies, but also other organizations who engage in this type of work. All right, I know we are just about at time here, and I'm going to just start wrapping us up. Our next meeting we have is scheduled for September 27th, and that's 10 to 11 a.m. So another hour meeting, and that's related to our laboratory testing program. So we are going to be focusing on details around what will be involved in standing up a laboratory testing program that's also directed under this law, and will be a part of the program that we, as a Department of Revenue, will be working very closely with not just the Department of Regulatory Agencies, but also critically the Department of Public Health and Environment. So we look forward to that conversation. Allison, any final comments before we close out?
No, thank you all for joining, and continue to please send any resources, information to me. I'll put my email into the chat one more time before we close out.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation. Know that this meeting's being recorded, and we're going to have that available to any interested party. We'll be publishing that on our Natural Medicine Division website. And so you can access all of the recordings from the listening sessions that we have held so far. We welcome additional information you'd like to provide leading up to our next round of listening sessions. And again, we'll be announcing additional ones that we'll be targeting to hold beginning in November. But we look forward to having folks participate in this upcoming one on September 27th from 10 to 11 a.m. Thank you so much for your participation. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. Have a great rest of your day and weekend.